Thank you for coming to the panel. My name is Christien. I work with Iodyne, which is actually, we are based in Mill Valley. We make workflow storage devices. So what does that mean? Well, we make hard drives, but we also make all the fantastic little bits that go with these hard drives to make it really, really usable for not only feature film production, but also television and sports and everything in between, because everybody needs storage. I'm really proud to work for this company, and I'll tell you why is because whenever you talk about storage or you talk about hard drives, everybody goes off to sleep a little bit, and I don't blame you. But we're taking this from a slightly different angle in the respect that we're actually starting with you guys. We're starting with the creative first. We're starting with how you use it, how you want to use it, what the actual workflow is, the job that needs to be done. Recently, we've had our equipment on such jobs, the Bob Dylan movie, Complete Unknown, so that's pretty cool. Pretty happy about that. The Brad Pitt movie, F1, part of the VFX team for Deadpool and Wolverine. Very, very happy about that. And also in the Cannes Film Festival, a feature called Wild Boys, which we worked very closely with the team. Absolutely fantastic group, and we're really, really proud to work with them. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of who Iodyne is. Today, we're going to be exploring how emerging technologies are transforming storytelling across film, television, and experiential. That's a new one, so stuff like, theme parks and the Sphere in Vegas. That's the thing that you'll get distracted by and almost crash on Tropicana Avenue there. Gaming and more, and we're going to be discussing some of the diverse aspects of those mediums, how they come to light. I'm going to start to my left here. This is Jerome Prescott. He is a 2020 Engineering Emmy winner for his teams and efforts in the remote workflow during the pandemic. Amazing. Has worked in IT and production technology for nearly 20 years. Nice work. And he's a member of Disney's renowned content security team and studio technology. Ladies and gentlemen, Jerome Prescott. Next on from there, Barbara Karanian. PhD. She's a lecturer at Stanford University teaching how storytelling can fuel innovation and engineering design. She's spent 17 years collaborating with Digital Film Tree and also is working with the EU with Europe's Cities Sustainable Group 2030. Is that right? That's amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Karanian. Next down the line, we've got Katie Mitchell. She is the Senior Manager of Technical Services and System Engineering for Disney Studios, servicing Marvel Studios. Her team works to bring to life the creative visions of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the MCU, supporting such films as Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Ladies and gentlemen, Katie Mitchell. And last but by no means least, Jim Godaldick. He's a trailblazer in visual effects, virtual production, cinematography, end-to-end production tech across the board. He's literally one of the smartest people I know. I'm going to work down some of the credits here. Masters of the Air, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Pinocchio, Yo Gabba Gabba Land, worked with recently Robert Zemeckis, and actually my personal favorite, The Muppets Mayhem. That's going to trump every single one of the credits. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Godaldick. Okay, so one of the things we're going to touch on, and we loosely touched on it in the intro there. I think we didn't really talk about it last year much, the pandemic. We didn't kind of want to bring the crowd down, but I think it's okay to talk about really some of the advantages of what's happened in that space. So kind of the pandemic brought about working remotely. It brought about some of these inventions, some of this tech that is now just part of our day-to-day lives, right? It taught us how to be creative virtually. So then when production brought us back, what I really want to know is what stuck. Do you like that it stuck around? Or do you is there some stuff that you kind of prefer just disappeared back into the shadows? And I'm going to start with you, Katie.
So one of the coolest things that happened was allowing creatives to work where they wanted to work or they could work. So I think the pandemic really showed that films could be made at a studio level everywhere. It was just interesting because being a former film student, you would just make a film wherever you could.
Right.
But then when you go to a studio, you have to make it where you're being asked to make. So the pandemic kind of created this time where it was like really exciting, where they're like, okay, now we have to make this, and it's not the way that we made it a year ago.
Right.
So make it happen, but make it secure and make it like real.
So you
fast.
had these parameters to work to, but be honest, was it kind of fun? Was it you were back in the lab again a little bit?
Incredibly fun.
Yeah.
Everyone was so humble, so patient, so modest, so
Lovely.
amazing. They just give us the craziest problems that were not actually problems. They were just like, let's make it work.
Right.
And so when we tried to find solutions, we would go, hey, do you think this will work? And they're like, let's try it. And we would always clear it with security, but we just make sure that it was something that everyone was open to, rather than saying like, this is the only way that you can do it. Because as we all learned through technology, giving options is better than giving a mandate. And the mandate is never a creative's favorite thing. So it was a really exciting time recording ADR, being able to edit remotely, being able to engage, do table reads, things like that. Very, very different.
That's really fun. I think you told me a story about some stuff that was being done in 2 different countries at the same time.
Yeah, we had a shoot where the director had to be in one place. One of the shoots was in the UK and the other shoot was in Australia, and we shot all of it in one day, and the director oversaw both of those in the same day.
So he's sitting there watching the entire thing.
Yeah, and when that director walked in, he was like, "This is the future of filmmaking. Like, I don't have to go anywhere. This is great."
Yeah.
So
pretty sure that's how voiceover artists feel. It's just like, I don't even have to get dressed.
Yeah. It was great. We all just sat in the room and he directed the scenes, and it happened.
That's amazing. Jerome, what was some of the stuff that really kind of stuck for you?
So it's really interesting. So when you deal with this, you know, most people here, you're creating film, you're doing a lot of entire processes, and you kind of don't really realize how many pieces you have. So there's scripts, there's versions of scripts, there's drawings, there's imagery, there's a lot of different pieces that are being moved around in an exorbitant speed and an exorbitant amount. So one of the situations you have to ask yourself is, well, how is that kept safe? How is that not distributed across the world that spoils the story and takes things away and so forth and so on. So the challenges in this when we were going through this was, just even as a whole in the industry was, okay, how do we move these things around and give everybody that flexibility while keeping everything, within parameter? Because if you think about how much things gets moved around, we have storyboards and concepts and concept art and stills, and there's just so many pieces of the elements that come together that all have to bring together to make it. Even costume designs, like colors, all of these things are all coming together. That's a lot of different assets. And one of the things that we had to do during that was really take a look at how do we allow that to happen without restricting you as an artist. Because the last thing that artists like to hear or creators like to hear from us is the word no. So I kind of have to move through that process of how to gently say no and say yes at the same time. So we really learned how to navigate that. Something we do, and it's something that my role consists of a lot right now. But in general, during that time period, I had to work on the ground. Prior to being at Disney, actually, I had to work with a lot of creatives to actually set up remote workflows for them to do things. So I had the most amount of remote editors in my existence that I could remember being set up. It was really that process of how can I make sure that you can do what you need to do no matter what's going on in the world? And the technology that came out of that was just mind-bending. We set new standards on technologies. We set new security standards. We set new processes. And that really told us that as a creative community, when it comes to creating things, there is no barrier. That's really what came about. There really wasn't a barrier. There really wasn't something that was going to stop you. And that's really what that demonstrated. So it was really cool to see a few nail-biting moments of making sure things didn't get out. But yeah,
just a few.
just a few.
Just a few. And you were doing this internationally as well.
Yeah, this was going all over the world. But it's interesting because it didn't just apply to film production. It applied to commercials. It applied to music videos. It was every single thing you could think about in the creative process was being done from every single part of the globe. And that really just showed us, okay, how can you take technology and make it become a tool for creative rather than a barrier? And that really set the pace for something new and where we're going forward with things. It's interesting when a creative says, I want to do this, and you're like, well, how do I do this? And you have to kind of go back and figure it out, because it's not that it can't be done, it's just how is it going to get done. Right. So again, another key point for that, I think, which was a great takeaway, was it's not that you can't do something, it's just how you're going to do it. And there's a plethora of ways of doing it. There's the really bad ways of doing it, and then there's the acceptable, let's get it done ways of doing it.
Jim, I'll chat to you, because obviously working as you have in production, you're literally the person with their hands on the kit going, sort of they're bringing this down and going, hey, we figured this thing out, go for it, and then you take it and go, okay, I've got to try and make this work. During that period, obviously nail biting, but there must have been some fun that came out of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, every project has its ups and downs in terms of technology, budget, timing, things that tend to and always do, blow up at times. Yeah. The systems and the technology and the collaboration that got put in place or was kind of separated from us during COVID was really looking at the structures of what worked and what didn't work. And when you're bringing all the teams together across global projects. So you may have a team that starts up in LA goes to bed, London wakes up,
Right.
Japan, wherever it is. And you have to have like a globally connected ecosystem
Yeah.
that is efficient and has to get things done on time. And if you're turning cameras on in the morning, in London, you have to make sure that the turnover from all the other places is ready for you to shoot the next morning.
So I mean, that's the technical side of the collaboration of filmmaking. Kind of turning more towards the actual creative side of the collaboration, because you and I were chatting about this before. Sort of, as you kind of knock ideas around and figure things out, saying no to somebody, in text message form is very different to how you say no in the room and kind of go, no, not quite right. But sort of, was that particularly challenging during that time?
It could be, because there were certain barriers where the technologies that we're using for creatives that have never used that or implemented it, there was the whole thing of like, well, I've never used it, so I'm afraid of it.
Right.
And implementing and onboarding creatives to some of these new workflows was scary for a lot of people.
Right.
Because either they were used to the way that their dailies were working, they were used to the way that they collaborated with all the other heads of departments between art department, scripty,
Right.
and all this stuff. So now everybody had to get a new look at how do you work on set and how do you work remotely. And then you have all these other vendors that are collaborating in. And it was just really trying to work through from the creative standpoint of how do you cohesively get together when you're not physically together.
It must require a huge amount of trust amongst the teams, which you kind of have to level set at the beginning, I'm guessing. This is like, everybody, we know we know it's different right now, so we just got to,
Yeah, and that's why you see a lot of teams travel with directors and
Right.
DPs and production designers, and that there's the shorthand that you get
Right.
with working with solid creative teams and technology groups, so when they succeed, you're going to want to take that same team with you everywhere you go. That doesn't always happen, but you travel together across the globe to go
probably get to know each other very well. I imagine,
and it exactly is that. Is you build this rapport and this trust, not only studio side but vendor side and with your teams, because as a supervisor, as a DP, you are made or broken by your team. And as shiny of an object of whatever technology you're using, if you don't have a solid team in place, you could replace this technology with whatever. It's really off of your teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to switch gears just ever so slightly, Barbara, if we may, because talking about the sort of the creative of storytelling here, and going back to that collaboration, you're working directly with students and you're teaching all these creative processes and stuff like this. I kind of want to know, how was that at the tail end of that, as people came back together, readjusting students to working together in person?
I feel like there's a couple layers of questions that you're asking me.
It's probably far too complex.
I really like this. You're making me think about this in a different way.
Yeah.
And I like the beginning when you said for Iodine that you're looking at what happened during the pandemic and what we get to do, and not silver lining it, but telling us some of the positive post storytelling.
Yeah.
I was telling Martin when we were having a pre-gaming conversation, that I remembered a student saying when we came back into the classroom that he just wished he could be under the covers in class again. I'm like, what? I hated it. I mean, I remember the first 4 weeks when we were locked down. I live in San Francisco. I teach in Palo Alto at Stanford. And I just felt like, thank God for red wine, white wine, and tequila for the first week, because it was just so hard. And
you're not in the minority.
Oh my gosh. But when we went back into the classroom, I felt like it was, there's a few things. One, there's a little social awkwardness, a little bit. And so the idea of stories. So the class, my stake in the ground class is called Tell, Make, Engage, Action Stories for Entrepreneuring. Yes, it sort of rolls off the tongue, right?
Does, yeah, man, very
but
natural.
in that particular class, I could see how intuitively they knew that emotion was at the core of what we were doing. So sure, our minds are built for stories, great. But in the room, being in person is so different than being on Zoom in person. First of all, we all know this because we don't want to talk about 2 years ago, but you can't look somebody in the eye on Zoom. You just can't do that. You can't. And my job in the classroom, the way I do it, is that I'm always paying attention. Right now, it's a pretty big audience, and I have to go like this to really look. But I'm looking to see where your eyes are, how you're engaged, are you leaning, who you're leaning towards, how close you are, what you're interested in. That's what I'm doing in my classroom. So on Zoom, it was what do I do? And I think the same thing was with the students. Does that sort of get to what you're...
It's that engagement, because it did kind of...
Yes.
pulled the wheel to the left.
So one is engagement and the other is collaboration, which I think you're hinting
Right.
at, and I think you were talking beautifully about that. And all three of you are actually, Jerome, Katie, and Jim. that they could collaborate. Like I tried to be really exciting on Zoom and be really enthusiastic. I'm already enthusiastic, so I'm like being enthusiastic on Zoom. But for them to collaborate together, and that's what the beauty is in the classroom, they're getting to learn from each other. They had to slowly work into that, like collaborate. Like, do I talk to them after class? Like, how do we? It was just a real adjustment.
The classroom and the set
and
is
they're
not
in their
massively
20s.
Dissimilar. Let's face it.
Right. But they're in their 20s, and some of them are in their 30s. Like, imagine. I just remember thinking, like, my nieces and nephews that are 5, 6, or like 10 or 12. Like, must have been horrifying. Yeah.
Yes, it was so strange. I'm going to take a bit of a technical left turn actually here. We're going to talk about experimental technology. And I'm basically going to run through all of you, so everybody chime in on this one. One of the things that period kind of gave us was all of this experimental technology, and it was fun, and some of it was crazy and all that kind of stuff. But when does that experimental technology, when does that actually turn into something that you can use on a movie, that you can bet a film on, that you can actually turn into sort of a proper processes that you can use on set?
If you look at the evolution of tech in relationship to the creative process, I would go so far as saying it's really interesting to note that a lot of the times creatives drives tech. It's actually, we tend to think of it the other way around, but it's actually, if you really take a look and step back, it's actually the opposite way around. You all keep saying how you want to do something better. You keep saying how to push the bar on something, how to do something differently, how to keep transforming and changing something, or looking at a vision and saying, I would like to see it a different way. And you want the audience to experience it a different way. And that, all we keep doing is try to catch up with you and catch up with how to deliver that vision. If you take any series of the movies we've looked at over the last several years, it's really been about that. Whether that's somebody wanted to do a movie entirely as one shot, which was done for several movies, which was extremely difficult to do. Yeah. That's like, I can't even begin to tell you the complications around that. And or the process of like taking something and saying, hey, we're moving animation from what it used to be, where it was, doing things by, per frame, all the way from the early 1950s to now, where it's literally done as rendering from processing, and then every other day, we're like, can we render faster? Can we render more things? We want more frames, and all of these different processes are changing. And really, honestly, it's because you as creatives are saying, I want to do it differently. I want to show a story. I want to tell it in a new light. I want to look at it differently. So it's just been interesting that the innovation process, that has been done is that we've added more technology and things for you to be able to do it faster and quicker, and then every other day you keep pushing that bar, and we keep trying to catch up with you. And that's literally the actual way it's being done. So, we get fearful on it, but the actual truth is that technically you drive the entire technology process that exists, and you do it every day, sometimes painfully, but you do it every day. So that's the reality of what we experience and what we see, and that's the truth.
It's also the kind of going back to what I said earlier is options. So like as technologists, we have to provide options as well. So they may not think of a workflow that needs to exist. They may not think of a tool that they need. So we're always looking at what's new and what's available and what we're seeing as like kind of the cutting edge or the theme that's coming out of it. And that comes to fruition because a lot of times they may say, I want to do something, but I absolutely have no idea how to do it. And so then you kind of have to see what's out there, what already exists, or do you have to build it in-house? So that's also another thing in our model is it something we can build, or is it something that already exists? So that happens a lot too.
That when you're selecting, like whether it be a technology or creative process, do you tread lightly on the experimental side, kind of going, well, this is something we know we don't have in the bag of tricks right now, and this is a first time to use it. Is this the right first time to use it?
Yeah, and I think that comes with just understanding the ask, and then try to say, okay, in my head, can I solutionize this just from the conversation, and then move towards like what tools I already know about or what could be. And so it's really important, especially within the internal technology teams, to talk about it and be transparent and have that communication level. So you can say, have you seen this before? Have you done this? And then everyone kind of collaborates in that sense in an internal respect, because not everyone is facing the filmmakers in the creative side, but if you have the resources and tools and people to do that, then it really actually is a really amazing collaboration.
Yeah, again, kind of talking about the sort of humility and the honesty, but also sort of the trust that you basically have with a team, and whether it be a class or a team or on set. Jim, what's your pitch on that stuff?
The technology should always be in service of story. I mean, there's the use of tech for tech's sake, and maybe that's great for marketing and PR of the project at times, but then what service or what utility is that technology, that pipeline, that approach, that piece of software, which camera, like what is it serving that particular filmmaker, that storyteller, to enable them? there's technology where it's enabling technology, and that's what a lot of us hope to do is introduce to creative teams something that is going to make their lives easier, or be able to have them get what's out of their head and on to whichever device it would be it big, projection down to a mobile device, right, or a Vision Pro, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And, for my role is I play problem solver as a visual effects supervisor. So I'm aware of technology, usually way ahead of what's coming, because of the past shows that I've worked with creatives, right, and said, hey, I did this show with so-and-so. We ran into these problems, and it was really frustrating for this DP and this director and this production designer and this art team and this construction team if we had scanned all the sets ahead of time and they were able to walk through the sets before we ever step foot.
We'll talk about that process a little bit, because scanning and LiDAR scanning. The actual process, you're going through and you're scanning all of the sets now. Is that by default?
It's not by default. It doesn't happen on every single project, but pretty much if anybody has an up-to-date smartphone in their pocket, they have this capability through different applications, both natively on iPhones, Android. It's built into our phones these days. On the higher end side, we're using more industrial LiDAR scanning and camera technology.
Weird little, looks all kind of looks like a big croissant type thing.
Yeah, way more expensive hardware than what's just in your pocket. But we're doing this sometimes when we go and scout situations, because before nail and hammer ever gets to a set construction crew is you're going out to do a recce. You're going out to look at locations. You're working with your location managers and auditioning what's going to fit for the story. So a lot of times when I go out, sometimes I'll go out with a small team or just individually,
right,
and we will go scan locations all over the globe, come back, put that into everything from an iPad player through to using VR tools or spatial tools.
They can literally sit there and see what you've scanned, what you've taken, and that's part of the previs workflow, or is that ahead of kind of previs?
Yeah,
workflow?
It would be considered in pre-visualization workflow. It's just it's how you audition things before you commit to them.
Right. So that's kind of not taken over, but very much become now a natural part of the scouting process. Yeah. Now you flip that on its head, and they're going, and because you obviously have gone into this, but you're scanning the sets then as you go through, and also after you're done, because all of that's got to stick around.
It could get reused. There's a reason. It can be used for visual effects. It can be used, if you're having different experiences built for a film. It's like you might do a film that might turn into a game, or have a duality of being a game and a film.
Go to a theme park, or or anything. That
you don't know what it's destined for these days, so capturing as much data as you can for it, because what happens if you have to do a reshoot or a pickup? You might have to rebuild a portion of that set. So you need the data from when you've done it.
Everything that happened there. So that's not just the data, it's not just the video. We were chatting about this earlier, but it's the metadata as well.
Yeah.
And the metadata, sort of as you go through it, it's everything from not just lens data, but it's everything from kind of what are some of the other, especially when it comes to LiDAR, kind of what are some of the other...
Well, when you're talking from photographical, you're capturing light data, you're capturing color data, you're capturing everything through there is useful for someone in production, post-production,
even
visualization.
If you don't know who.
Yeah, it's better to capture that data. It's better to prepare to know that any one of you out here might use the data in a different way. So it's better to capture it, because yes, is it more so for visual effects and post-production? Yes, we tend to need more of that data from previs or even concepting through, because it helps inform us, come back to all of you to say, hey, there's solutions here that we can help you with, or there hasn't been, maybe something has been, looked over.
Right. But it's a massive amount of data that you're acquiring, and at a studio level like Disney, now you've got the other issue with that is now you've got to keep all of that safe and nobody can look at it and nobody can touch it or put it there or leave it in an accidental email. So that's now another task that you've got. How do you keep a handle on that and not just let that sort of, because you can't just let it go, hey guys, you're all set, let you out the gate, 6 weeks of shooting, and I'll check back in with you next month, you know? I'm sure it's not that hands off.
So it's interesting because it actually plays into a little bit of what Barbara talks about from a storytelling perspective. Because let's be transparently speaking, there's a storytelling process, and I'll piggyback with Barbara here to kind of just go through some of this, but it's really like the perspective of like, what is everything that's consisting of the storytelling process? I take you to step back and say, to ask a really interesting question. What are all of your assets? And if I asked you one day to sit down and start writing that list, you will find that the list is a lot larger than you think. That's part one. Part two is then, if I ask you in that list, what do you not want to be released about that, all of those assets, your list also starts getting longer. Then I'm asking a third question. Who do you want to know or have access to it? Right? That changes it because any aspect of it can change its storyline. Any aspect of it can change something about what you're trying to tell that story of. So if you look at those three facets alone, there's a psychology behind that of understanding how things, operate and really what that storytelling process is going to consist of. And I tap on Barbara here to kind of like expand on that. I was like, why is that such a significant part of it? It's not just keeping it secure, but it's also understanding what are all the elements involved in it. And fun fact, what are all the digital elements involved in it? So now you have this dichotomy of like, oh, well, I'm just talking about a story. It's like, well, it's not just a story. Because now the story is like, well, what are the digital assets? What are the technology assets? What are your decisions? Are you going to use Premiere or Avid? Right? It's a funny question, but it really does start changing things. What am I storing this on? Am I going to use a G-RAID or am I going to use iodyne? Right?
So you should use iodyne, just clarifying about that.
What's your perspective in terms of like the storytelling process that really changes that?
So can I just step back to the experiment thing for a second?
Yeah,
because
go
I
for
think
it.
it relates to our conversation
Absolutely.
we had before. So I used to teach on the East Coast, loved it. And I came out to Stanford as a visiting professor. And the three words that I kept hearing over and over and over and over again were prototype, ambiguity, and empathy. And I know you know what all those things mean, but let me just
prototype, ambiguity,
and
ambiguity and empathy.
Yeah, and I don't usually put that on one slide if I'm talking to a class, but I do now.
Okay.
Because I see storytelling as rapid prototyping. So that idea of like iteration.
Good way
So
of putting it,
my background is psychology. Like I've been teaching psychology-related classes to engineering, design, construction management, software, all those kinds of non-psychology people for a long time. And I've always used story as the sort of like the bridge between what's theory over here and maybe what's experience on this side. So
Right.
I think I'm getting to what you're saying. This is going to be off, but it's a little like anecdote. I was telling you, Jerome, when we were having breakfast that students, there's a couple questions they always ask. And one is, how sad can I make my audience? How sad can I make my audience? And I'm like, because remember, they're in person, that we're doing this thing together.
Right.
And they're telling all different kinds of stories. And these are students from all different backgrounds, all different cultures, different ages. And I say, as sad as you can take. Like, if you're okay with it, then the audience will be okay with it. But there's always an exception to that. Because there's always one student that thinks they can handle it. I'm like, no. I have to like stop them, sort of like, well.
Is that always a temptation in storytelling to kind of go, let's make it sadder, let's make it grueling?
Well, I mean, for the shock factor, I guess maybe. But
is it tough when you are on these big budget productions managing those expectations?
It also depends on the team who you're working with, on how they're expecting some of the technology to get them out of a pickle in some instances.
So their kind of perception of the technology?
Yeah, and
or
just
initial perception?
Yeah, there's the perception of what they think the technology can do because that's what they've been sold by either a company or somebody within the team that says, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. It will
Right.
solve all our problems. You'll come in and
Right.
budget on time and all of this. But you need to get buy-in from the creative teams.
Okay.
Because it's creative and it's technology buying into a particular pipeline or a particular camera system or a new approach.
Yeah.
With a lot of the stuff that I've been lucky to work on has been working with creative teams that, Bob Zemeckis
Right.
has been blazing a trail for a very long time.
Yeah.
And with Bob comes the creative team. So like working with Kevin Bailey, who's been Bob's right-hand man for a lot of the visual effects. And Kevin's very much I'm willing to take this risk because I think it's going to benefit the storytellers I'm working with. What do you have that helps
Right.
solve these situations for story or for just the filmmaking process that gets benefit? You don't have unlimited time and you don't have unlimited budget, and you don't have all the time with your talent as well. So you have to do all of this, like, you know, give and take on things.
Keeping all the plates moving, everything spinning, and at the same time. That actually kind of leads us a little bit into talking about those technical tools that they get sold as a little bit of a kind of answer for everything, a bit of a magic wand, which can be very deceiving for, obviously, not only the people operating, but also the people who want to utilize these tools to bring their vision. Is that really tough, crushing somebody's hopes and going, that doesn't actually do what you think it's going to do?
I'm here for this one. I think it's all in how you present it, because one thing is how a tool is presented to us as technologists, but another tool is we present it to the creatives. It's about being honest and saying, here's what you're trying to solve. Here are things we found that don't solve this, but this solves this, A or B. And I think that honesty comes with trust. And when you have the trust of the filmmakers and what you're trying to accomplish together, I think it becomes more of an open opportunity to use those things. There's a lot of shows that we've worked with where we've had a tool that we thought was really cool and was going to revolutionize the way that they did things. And we did multiple of those tools. And then one kind of just stands ahead and says, okay, this is going to work for us, because it gives us, and this goes back to what all of the panelists are saying, is the data that we need later on. So we have one tool that allows the writing team to basically virtualize and digitize everything that they're doing, and you can take snapshots every 5 minutes. So like in a traditional writer's room, it's just everyone together, and there's a story assistant that's writing everything down, and whatever they hear is what's important and gets transcribed to everyone else. But this tool sees every change and every move, everything, and when they're in the stage of editing the movie, it's just like a new version of the script, because they have all the alternative conversations and tools that they've done.
So it's, and you say every 5 minutes. So in the writing room, it's almost everything's. It's more metadata, really, isn't it? It's just another kind of point.
Yeah,
of metadata.
and they can translate to storyboards. That translates back to editorial decisions. It translates to everything. The requirement, though, is that you have to use it. So you have to show the value, and then you say, I know it's hard because you're used to just having this conversation or writing it on an index card of whatever size you prefer. If you digitize it, if you allow this process to exist, you get a lot more out of it. So it kind of ties back to what everyone's saying is, as long as we have that data, then it can help you later on. And that starts with the story.
It all starts with the trust and the collaboration. Jerome, you were going to...
I was just going to say, I mean, then there's the just opposite side of that, which is, as a creative, you may just say, this is the tool I want to use. Or, I found this new thing and I'd like to use this new thing, ? So then we get to navigate that path a little bit, because every day there's a new tool, there's a new technology, there's something else coming out, and then the creative may say, I want to use this new thing on this project. So we have to navigate the difference between what that looks like for you, and then also, does it work? Is it safe? Can you arrive at the results you're looking for, rather than investing all this time and money into it?
Obviously, we've got a huge amount of experience here working in production and studio. It's the heights that everybody wants to reach, but working there's been so much disruption now to the actual process of that, and obviously kind of a little bit obviously, but I think about like YouTube as far as distribution goes. Can you think of some of the stuff that's actually gone the other way, and actually stuff that you've kind of looked at a grassroots level of filmmaking that has gone back up the waterfall to you guys, and you've gone, actually, I didn't even think about doing it that way.
Well, the influence goes back and forth these days. So I think
it's an easier.
Well, to say that YouTubers are not filmmakers or not content creators, like that myth has been dispelled.
It's been debunked,
you have very talented creatives who have engaging stories to tell in a lot of different mediums that are purely just on YouTube. They're not chasing Hollywood. They're not going after that, and they're fine with what they've curated. And a lot of them are all about community. That's what filmmaking is supposed to be too. It's about film. It's about storytelling and community and bringing people together. And I think it goes back and forth, because you see the popularity of the new storytelling paradigms that have come out, and Hollywood goes, "Oh, we want a piece of that." We want to capture that lightning in a bottle. We're going to go after Mr. Beast, or we're going to go after these different creatives that have, and that's back to, I hate the word democratization, but like, because the tools are so much more accessible to everybody now.
Availability, isn't it?
Is really, everybody has an individual story to tell. So there's a lot of great stories that have not been discovered yet, have not been told, and they're still going to come out. So I think it's a back and forth of, the waterfall used to be everybody wanted to attain to be, Spielberg, Zemeckis, and all the other talented filmmakers out there. And it was always like, well, they have access to this because they have Hollywood budgets.
Right.
Nowadays, because some of the tooling and the technology has changed, a lot of creatives have a base level that will let them do stuff that can be on par with Hollywood.
They can still tell the story they want to tell. Yeah.
Quick plug on that. I mean, from a technology perspective, and I'm sure Katie will plug into this as well. Over the last couple of years, drone footage has gone up as a tool set, for example, and that started as something very different. And what you have in the creative space is, how can I do something with what I have and my resources, which makes you extremely innovative. You figure out ways to do things in ways that have never been done before, and then that starts changing the bar. It's like, wow, they could do that with an iPhone and I can go back to a story, anecdotal. I shot an entire fight scene with 2 Kinects from the Xboxes, and I did an entire fight scene that ended up in a feature film. So I'm not gonna say what it is, but
Don't say which
like
one.
but it was literally they told us this is what we have. You need to get it done. So we literally figured it out. Motion captured the entire
amazing.
thing, did an entire fight scene, put it all together, threw it on, and sent it off, and then it was like, great, we're done. It was like,
And they ask you what camera you
oh,
used, and you're like,
we're like, ah. So that's an example. It's just really about that, just
lovely.
get it done.
I would add just searchability. So all the online content creators, they are so fast to find other, mediums and things that they want to do. And I think that's what creatives want to do internally, is they want to search what's available to them within the studio. So I think that's really, going back to data, it's just really important to have that, quickness of being able to say what you want.
Kind of availability.
Yeah.
Barbara, is it tough keeping the shiny toys
Away
on the
from-
shelf?
away from
Yeah,
them.
while you're trying to teach the fundamentals.
So are you hinting at, do they use their iPhones in class?
Do they use their iPhones?
We know we've had more than one conversation in department meetings, East Coast, West Coast. I've been out here for 15 years. And I don't want to show off or anything, but no one's using their iPhone in my class. It's not because
Must
I'm
be
so
so
amazing.
entertaining,
No.
Barbara, that's
It's not because I'm amazing or adorable. I guess I am. It's because they don't want to miss what somebody else might be saying about them. They're putting their phone down in my class,
So
for
the
sure.
thing that they're actually going into their phone for, which is what is everybody else doing, they're actually getting that
I think that's
within
well
the
said.
classroom
Yeah,
and going, hang on a second, I want to know what everybody else here is doing.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of, I feel like you're so technologically experts that this may be a little off track, but I was remembering our conversation about your dad, who's an animator, and 5 lines, and I'm thinking about simple, and you said 5 to 7 lines?
Yes, my dad would always say, Drew, he was a caricaturist, drew a lot of people, and he said, you can tell a good actor or the look of them because you can draw them in 7 lines or less.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of simple and elegant, which I learned for my research, doing research for my studies. But with my students, I watched this. I learned from, to take a scenario, an anecdote. I learned from a story. Well, from what happened in a class. I was part of a teaching team for an engineering design entrepreneurial 3-quarter class. So that's almost a whole. Well, it's a year for them.
Right.
And these are students that were from engineering design and some business school students from the school business. And at the very end of the 3rd quarter, they all would make short presentations, and we'd have a practice. And there was this one team that everyone couldn't wait to see their practice because they had an animator in the room and on their team who came from Hollywood, who was studying. And it was this exquisite, amazing animation, but it was so detailed. This other team, inspired by what that team did, last minute, 2 days before their final pitch to the VCs and everything, we're all watching it. They just did this little simple 3-line, 4-line cartoony thing that looked like the room roared for them, and no one wanted to look at the animator who had studied, and I think it hurt her feelings, but I think she learned something. No, it hurt her feelings, but I think we all learned about the simple, elegant. It looked like it wasn't smoke and mirrors. It looked like they worked on it, but it was the last minute. So they weren't using a lot of technology.
That's amazing. I want to open it up, if we've got a couple of questions, up in the front row here. So essentially talking about the tools in order to do some of these kind of next generation processes, using word processors again. How do you source the tools? Where do you find them? How do you know that they're safe? If you don't work for a big studio, which I presume nobody else does.
I'll give you the 30-second version. So you literally are, this is where this innovation process comes from. It's going to have to be that trial and error, that creativity. You're going to have to hit it because, frankly speaking, and honestly, we do the same. a creative comes to me and says, we want to use this tool. I've never heard of it, don't know what it is, have no idea about it, and we have to go in and say, he heard about it and use it in some other project. And a lot of the times, creatives coming from your space, coming to work for studios for doing other projects, will come with a tool set that we've never heard of or never touched, but you've been using for years, and it's not in our pipeline. It hasn't gone through our scrutiny, and we have to work through that and try to understand, is it workable or not? So to your point, it's like, it's really going to be, and that's where the fun comes in, transparently. You're going to have to go through and try it and find out what's going to work or not, and really kind of start making it, because that's your storytelling, and you're going to find tools that are going to be like super specific to you, that are not going to be like what we're going to like source because we have a totally different pipeline. And that's going to be really cool, and that really makes a huge difference, and actually really tailors this story to you and to how your process is, because you're going to use this tool and combine with that tool, combine with this other tool, and all of a sudden it's now your creative process, and that's what's genius about it.
Can't get around the trial and error, is what you're saying. It's just
See, that's a trade-off. What I would recommend is use your community. At that point, stretch into your community. You really should be using your community to say, hey, you know what, I need to use this, but hey, can you guys try this? And can you guys try that? And we'll talk in 2 weeks. Like, you have more manpower than we can get at any given time, because you guys talk to each other.
Social media is still good for that. I mean, using the different social media platforms that are out there is really good, because a lot of people on the indie level are doing the same experimenting or looking for the same solutions that you're looking for. So using everything from, yes, people still use hashtags, but using keywords and using things to find people that are searching for the same things you are is everything from Reddit to Twitter to the platforms and, like, you know, Discord and Slack and other things like that is really out there, because there's lots of people like yourself that are still looking for answers. And then there's people still in that kind of experimental indie world that are trying to connect with other like-minded people to be like, I'm not the technologist, but I know there's some things out here that can benefit me. And there's millions of people like yourself who are trying to connect to the usability of these new tools that have become available to all of us. So they're out there, and your question is not an outlier. It's something that comes up all the time. Like, how do I find this? And even for us, staying on top of this stuff is daunting, because especially with AI, every other day, every week, there's a new model. There's something new out there. It's very competitive out there in a lot of this stuff too. So it confuses us. So you're not alone in the confusion of it. There's a lot of enabling tools that are going to be coming off of the iterations of machine learning and computer vision. Everybody calls it AI, but let's call it what it is. It's machine learning.
Yeah.
If you look at the breadcrumbs that are being dropped from a lot of this, and there's this hype cycle right now of what are, you know, these companies that are chasing valuation are marketing to us as creatives to be like, we have this new one-button solution that's going to render out your movie, you know, by the time you wake up and have your coffee tomorrow.
Again, the promise.
That's not the case. It is a lot of hype. I've not seen any one of these AI platforms that have delivered Final Pixel to the quality it needs to be yet. But there are components of all of these different things, when brought together with a creative team and technology, can get this stuff out.
It'll assist. It'll guide.
It is that's what
It'll
AI is. It's not getting rid of any of us.
It's not replacing a person.
It is assistive. You still need creative artists to take it to that final level. You still need scripties and production design. This stuff is a marriage of taking the tech with the creative and then getting that magic.
Yeah.
It's just going to help us get things a little bit faster.
I'll make a shameless plug, because I've had the privilege of working with iodyne for a little bit here. I would say that the way that because they've worked a lot collaboratively with us and a number of other studios, our peer studios, and what they're doing to push the storage capacities and stuff has definitely been, frankly speaking, like, they're pushing on levels that we've not seen before. So they've been really working with us, Disney, Netflix, other studios as well, because storage is a major part of what you're doing. Like, it's just going to be one. And unfortunately, the speed of storage and everything else just keeps climbing on, like, an exorbitant level. And every time, ask Katie, ask JM, ask anyone in the team, say, when we need to get stuff off of those drives, it's like, can you do it faster, please? All the time. And they've been definitely working very much so. And some of the things we've seen done from the iodyne team in the last year has been that, wow, this is like they're understanding what it is. So shameless plug to them on that. But I just wanted to call that out.
I do appreciate the props, and I have to kind of take my hat off to the engineers and designers at iodyne, because one of the things that has been resonating is collaboration, communication, trust. And I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit here, guys. So yeah, but it's one of those things, and it's not just about amongst the teams. It's about also, we're tech designers, we're technology designers. We want to hear what it is that you need. We need that communication and that trust, and we need that collaboration with all of you. That's what makes it fantastic. And it's so it's not just at a big scale. It's also at a small scale, and it's also with us. So we hope to hear from you more. We want to talk to you as much as possible. So please always seek us out. The $0 budget.
I'll give an interesting perspective for you for your zero budget part. One, there's two sides you have to understand as a creative. You have a business angle and you have your creative angle, and you are going to learn that duality as you go forward. So zero budget isn't really zero budget because you're investing time. So technically speaking, you're not at a zero budget. So it's not because your time is valuable. So there's that. And the other perspective as you go through it is that you're combining your knowledge set in terms of how to do it better, how to do it with what you have. What you do have is time, as limited as it might be. So how can you become efficient with that? Because that is literally your investment. And then taking that investment and saying, well, what technologies can I use in this entire plethora and my community, because you have social media and friends and other filmmakers, to allow me to arrive at that success rate. So technically, the ability to do it really comes down to you taking that business model and applying it to yourself and saying, great, I'm going to use the time I have with the people I know as resourcing, who all have time, to then find what resources I could do to get something done. And I guarantee you will find all the answers for all of the zero budget projects that you have that will result in it. But keep in mind that the business model is, if you finish it, how are you going to move it around? And do you want to monetize it? The ultimate answer to that will tell you which direction you want to go with. Because if you don't want to monetize it and you just want to get it out, different results. If you do want to monetize it, you're going to have to change your strategy a little bit. So there's a lot of those things that come together, and that's if you point out. But just keep in mind that your time is valuable, so you're actually never at $0. I just want you to remember that.
So you got lots of time but no money. But then as you go up through the industry, then you got no time but people are chucking money.
It's
at
the
you.
tools
Is that what
too.
it is?
There are tools for people with very low budget to no budget. There are tools out there that you can use. There's real-time game engines that don't charge you until you start earning a certain amount of money. You've got a camera in your pocket. You've got a supercomputer. We all do in our pockets. It is, if you have a laptop, you have something to edit off of and create pixels and story. It's also what you're trying to do for that. And I can guarantee you can find free tools up to a certain point that will let you and a team build a proof of concept, shoot a short, do all of that. You've got free editing software and color grading and visual effects software. You've got Blender for free, 3D software. You've got Unreal Engine, which is free up to a certain point.
Free editing.
Your film festival.
You'll find it, and just like we were talking before of finding the people and finding the tech, go back to your community to find the other people that can balance what it is. If you don't have a camera, look at Martin. He's got this nice red camera here. It's like you got to beg, borrow, and steal to get the vision done.
Jim.
So. I just now you're
just
hired as a
rented out my
DP.
camera phone. No, I appreciate it. I think we do actually have to wrap up. Thank you so much to everybody for coming out. Thank you for participating, and thank you to Jerome, to Barbara, to Katie, and to Jim. Thank you so much.